Welcome, Professor Harari. Welcome to our show. I know that it's the second time around that I'm speaking to you. I'm taking it as a really big pleasure. I've told you several times that I'm a big fan of your work and your message. Thank you for joining me.
I'll do my best, and thank you for inviting me.
So, the coronavirus, it's spreading fast, it's spreading worldwide. Some people have cited Korea to be effectively responding to this outbreak. What is your view on how the Koreans have been handling this crisis? And did you have anything in particular that was impressive?
I'm not an expert on Korea. I try to follow the news from all over the world. It certainly seems that Korea has been dealing with this crisis in an admirable way. And you hear in many countries that they are looking up to Korea to learn how to deal with the crisis. And I hope that Korea, that Korea will indeed send information, send maybe even experts to different countries around the world to help them deal with the epidemic and with the economic crisis and to gain from the experience of Korea.
You are the author of a world-renowned book, and you're also a bestseller in Korea, the book Sapiens. So I have to ask you, as sapiens, or being the political beings we are, what is our greatest asset? What is our greatest strength in overcoming and combating this crisis?
Our greatest asset is our ability to cooperate on a global level. Viruses can't cooperate like this. A virus in Korea cannot give advice to a virus in Italy about how to infect people. But what a doctor in Korea finds out in the morning can help save people's lives in Italy by evening. And if today the Italian government is facing the same dilemmas and questions that the Korean government faced a month or two ago, then it can ask for advice. And this is our greatest asset, our greatest advantage. If we use it, we will be able to overcome this crisis in a much better way. If, on the other hand, countries don't cooperate and instead they blame each other and they fight for the scarce resources and they spread misinformation, then this will make it much more difficult to deal with the present crisis, and it will poison international relations for years to come.
And right now we're facing the coronavirus, but we're also facing 2020, which is a year of election to many countries around the globe, including Korea. We will be holding our election exactly 1 week from now. I know that there was an election in your own country, Israel, and there will be one later on in the year in the United States. However, people seem to be preoccupied with news of the coronavirus. Already, we're seeing less interest in political news. Do you think that this might be hazardous to a democratic decision-making process?
Yes, very much so. People should realize that this is not just a health crisis, this is also a political crisis. We need to make a lot of decisions, very important decisions, which will shape the world for years to come. And we have choices about these decisions, and the choices are in the end a matter of politics. For instance, whether to deal with the crisis through international cooperation or with each country competing against the others, it is a choice, and it's a political choice. Similarly, if you think about the economic situation, obviously governments need to intervene and to help businesses, but they can't help all the industries, all the businesses. They have limited resources. So which businesses to save and which businesses to allow to collapse? This is a political choice the government needs to make. We are seeing a restructuring of the job market. Many people starting to work from home. Many people are starting to or losing their jobs. So again, it's the decision of the government how to restructure the job market. Let's say people move to work from home. How do you ensure that they still have the same social benefits and a protection that they had before? And all this will be decided in the next month or two, but it will change society for years to come. If during this crisis we don't pay attention and we say, well, we can deal with it later on. It will be very difficult to deal with it in the future. The Prime Minister in 2021 is basically, it's like, coming to a party after the party is over, and the only thing left to do is wash the dirty dishes. All the big decisions, all the money is spent now. Whoever is Prime Minister in 2021, it will be too late to change the policy, to change the decisions. So it's very important. Yes, of course, people need to also focus on the epidemic itself. How many people got sick? How many people died? But at the same time, we should focus on what's happening on the political level, hold politicians accountable for their decisions, and elect politicians that we think will implement better policies, better international policies, and also better policies at home.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are also concerns about low voter turnout to the extent where the next National Assembly might lose its legitimacy. I mean, are these concerns valid? Do you think, what are your thoughts for contemplating voters around the globe?
Emergencies like this are a time of crisis for democracies in general. This is the time when dictatorships can rise to power. People are afraid. People are afraid for their lives. People are losing their livelihood, their jobs, their businesses. So many people hope that there will be some big, powerful leader that will solve all the problem and protect them. And we see the rise of such authoritarian leaders in some countries, like in Hungary. And that's extremely dangerous. Because actually, democracies are better at dealing with such crises, such emergencies, than dictatorships for two reasons. First of all, a well-informed and self-motivated population can deal with a crisis better than an ignorant and policed population. If you want people to follow, say, social distancing rules or to wash their hands a lot, it's much easier if people trust the information they receive and if they understand the logic behind it, than if you have some dictator just ordering people what to do. If you want people to wash their hands, one way is to put a policeman in every toilet or a camera in every toilet and punish those who don't wash their hands. Another method is to explain to people, to give them good education so they understand what a virus is, how a virus causes disease, and how we can protect ourselves from viruses by washing our hands. If we have such a population which is well educated and believes the information it receives, it's much easier to deal with the crisis. And that's a huge advantage for democracies, because in dictatorships, people usually don't trust the information they receive. The other big advantage of democracies is that, in a dictatorship, you can make decisions quickly, but if the dictator adopts the wrong decision, usually the dictator is unwilling to admit a mistake and try something else. He will just blame it on enemies outside or on traitors within and demand even more power. A democratic government is much more willing to admit a mistake and to try something else. There are different voices. There is more openness. So in the long run, it takes better decisions. So it's very important in this crisis that people keep their trust in the democratic system, that they go to vote, that the elections really represent the interests and voices of everybody and not just of a small minority. This is essential because the decisions being taken will influence everybody.
You're speaking about leadership. Are there any lessons for the leadership to take away from this crisis, from the coronavirus? Is there anything that you would like to urge the next congressman or the next National Assembly to act on?
Maybe the most important lesson is the need to think about this crisis in global terms, because no country by itself can solve this problem. As long as the epidemic keeps spreading in any country, it's a threat to all countries, even if Korea manages to stop the epidemic for now in Korea, if it continues to spread in Indonesia, in Bangladesh, in Egypt, it can always come back, and it can even come back in a worse form because the virus keeps mutating. As long as the virus is inside human being, it keeps mutating and could become more lethal, more infectious, and then the second wave of the epidemic will be worse. We have seen it before in epidemics in history, like with the Spanish influenza of 1918. There was a first wave in April, May, in the spring of 1918. It infected people all over the world, but it killed only a few people because it wasn't very lethal. Then the virus mutated. We don't know where, somewhere in the world, the virus mutated, and there was a second wave in the summer of 1918, which killed tens of millions of people. And this can happen again. So we need a global plan of action of how to stop this epidemic everywhere. And similarly, also on the economic level, we need a global economic plan. Some countries, the rich countries, they can perhaps deal with the economic crisis by themselves, but the poor countries will not be able to do it. Unless we have a global economic plan, then many countries might completely collapse, and the resulting chaos and violence and waves of immigration will destabilize the entire world, and of course the rich countries too will suffer from it. So I would urge any government in Korea or in any other country, of course you need to take care of your citizens, but to do so, you need to cooperate with other countries. I'm not against, nationalism. I think nationalism is a very good thing, but nationalism doesn't mean hating foreigners or trying to harm foreigners. Nationalism is about taking care of your compatriots. And in this crisis, in order to really take care of people in your country, you must cooperate with foreigners. And it starts, with just sharing information to understand how the virus is spreading, how it can be stopped, how to develop a vaccine. Scientists all over the world need to share information, and governments need to share information and to know that the information they receive from other governments are reliable. So this is like the first priority, is to have a global solidarity in this crisis.
So you brought up the topic of nationalism. You stress over and over the importance of global cooperation, yet in recent reports, we see incidents of hatred, of racism, especially Asians being verbally abused, physically attacked. What do you think about xenophobia? Do you think this could maybe hinder a fast mitigation of the coronavirus? Do you think that this is just a passing phase, or do you think that it might outlast the pandemic?
I hope it is a passing phase. Xenophobia makes it more difficult to deal with the epidemic. If you can't trust the information you receive from other countries, then you don't know what to do in your own countries. It's much more difficult to develop treatments, to develop the vaccine, and so forth. I think the biggest danger we are now facing is not from the virus, but it is from the inner demons of humanity itself, like greed and hatred and ignorance. If, as a result of this crisis, we see more hatred between people, if people are more greedy, like corporations just want to make money out of this crisis, if people succumb to ignorance and believe in all kinds of conspiracy theories, then this will make the crisis far, far worse. If, on the other hand, we overcome our inner demons, we develop solidarity and compassion and not hatred. We develop generosity and not greed. And we develop wisdom and not ignorance. We believe science, not conspiracy theories. We'll be able to deal with this epidemic much more easily, and we'll come out of it much stronger, more united, better able to deal with any future crisis also.
And facing election season, politicians are now limited in organizing campaign rallies or meeting with voters. And we see a fast transition into untapped methods, including media politics. Do you think that this new change could be hazardous to a healthy functioning democracy? I'm talking about disinformation, fake news. Do you think that maybe this could jeopardize the integrity of the election?
Yes, there is always this danger. Again, I'm not against new communication methods. It's good that we can now communicate in more than just one way. And fake news is not a new thing. Fake news existed already hundreds and even thousands of years ago. And actually, people today are better educated and more able to distinguish between fake news and reliable information. But it's not easy, and we need a continuous effort which starts in schools, in education. We need to give people not just information, but above all the ability to distinguish between reliable information and unreliable. You know, in the past, information was scarce. So the main difficulty was simply to get the information. And this is what schools did. They gave pupils information. Now people are flooded with enormous amounts of information. They don't need more information. They need the ability to distinguish reliable from unreliable information. And this should be a basic skill that we teach everybody in schools. Like also in the present crisis, we see there is a lot of reliable scientific information about the epidemic, but also numerous conspiracy theories. And many people can't tell the difference. So, you know, this is when scientific education helps society. If you are told some conspiracy theory about the spread of coronavirus, just ask the person who is telling you this theory to explain to you what is a virus and how does it cause disease. If the person has no clue, if he or she can't give you a good explanation, don't believe the theory this person is giving you. You don't need a PhD in biology, but you do need a basic understanding of biology in order to deal with the present crisis.
In your recent interviews, you expressed concerns over surveillance policies. Mm-hmm. And, you know, part of what the Korean government has been doing is essentially contact tracing, where they've been collecting information from mobile phone, credit card, GPS, even security camera footage to recreate a patient's recent whereabouts. And they've distributed this information online for everyone to see. Would you be concerned if this kind of monitoring system were put into place to prevent or quickly overcome future epidemics?
I'm not against surveillance technology. It can be a very useful tool in the fight against epidemics, but it should be done in a careful way, which doesn't endanger the freedom and the rights of citizens. There are two important things to take into account. First of all, who is the authority which is gathering and analyzing the information? If it is the security services, the police, the army, then that's really dangerous. It shouldn't be the business of the secret police or the army to surveil the citizens. Instead, it should be an independent health authority, which is just focused on preventing epidemics and doesn't share the information, let's say, with the police or with big corporations. And if it's like this, then this is okay. Secondly, it's important that whenever there is surveillance, it goes both ways. It's not just the government monitoring citizens. At the same time, it's also citizens monitoring government. Yes, you need to monitor my movements to make sure that I'm not sick, I'm not infecting others, but at the same time, I should be able to monitor the decisions of the government, how they are being made. If they distribute now billions of dollars, who is getting this money and why? I want this to be transparent. If you have this two-way system, some of the things I do are monitored and at the same time I can monitor the government, that's fine. If it's just one way, if it's just the government monitoring me and I have no idea what they are doing and how they are making decisions and distributing money, then this is a recipe for a dictatorship, and this should be avoided.
In some recent reports, the Korean government has said that they will now use digital anklets to monitor people who are ordered into self-quarantine and fine them if they wander off. Now, there's a contradiction here, obviously, the issue of privacy. Do you think that this is a fair trade-off? Do you think that, sacrificing liberal values, what lengths can we go to justify this?
I don't think we should make the choice between privacy and health. If you put it like this, if you tell people, what do you want? Do you want health or do you want privacy? Then obviously most people will choose health. But it's wrong to put it like this because we should be able to have both health and privacy. For instance, already today, in my relationships with my doctor, I expect the doctor to provide me with health care and at the same time to protect my privacy. My doctor has enormous information about me, which he or she could share with my employers, with the government, with the police, with my insurance agency, and this could harm me, but my doctor doesn't do it because she's serving me and my interests. And in this way, I enjoy both. And it's the same with this kind of preventing epidemics, that it should serve the interest of the citizens and not just say of some big corporations or the police. And in this way, we can enjoy both health and privacy at the same time.
Lastly, throughout this whole crisis, you've stressed the importance of a global cooperation. What might this look like to Koreans? A global coalition. What can Koreans do in shaping it? What part can they take? What role can Koreans play in this global plan?
So it has many parts. One obvious thing, which I already mentioned, is the sharing of information. So Korea shares information about the disease in Korea, and Italy shares information about Italy, and so forth. And this enables experts and scientists to understand what is happening, to find out the best ways to contain the epidemic, to develop medicines and vaccines. This is one very important thing, which is already happening. Another thing is to have a global effort to produce and distribute medical equipment. At present, different countries are competing for equipment like masks and gloves and respiratory machines and testing kits. This creates inefficiencies in production and injustice in distribution. The equipment doesn't go to the countries that need it most. Instead, it goes to the countries that can pay the most. So we need global cooperation in production and distribution to make production more efficient and distribution more fair. We also need, as I mentioned, a global economic plan, how to save the economies, not just of the rich countries, but especially of the poor countries who can't handle this crisis by themselves. And we also need a new agreement on travel across the world. At present, more and more countries are refusing to accept travelers from other countries, and this makes it difficult to cooperate on the economic and scientific level. We need some people to keep moving. We need doctors and experts and business people and journalists and politicians to keep moving between countries. So we need an agreement. Let's say that Israel checks people before they board the plane, and when they reach Korea, the Korean government can trust the Israeli government that it checked the people in advance, so they allow them in. And we need some protocol that all the countries agree in order to have this. So these are just a few examples of the kind of global cooperation we need, and every country can contribute. Korea can contribute its expertise and experience to the sharing of information. It can help with the production and fair distribution of medical equipment. It's one of the richest countries in the world, so it certainly has a role to play in coming up with a global safety net for the poor countries. And the same with the travel, that every country can take a lead in that. It just needs the initiative and goodwill and solidarity in order to have this.
Thank you. Before we end, do you have any last words you would like to say to your fans in Korea, to your readers here in Korea?
Well, I would just say that humanity has everything it needs in order to overcome this crisis. It's not like the Middle Ages, when people didn't know what they were facing. We know what is threatening us. We know how this epidemic is spreading. We have the science and technology to stop it. Now all we need is to cooperate wisely all over the world, and I hope we manage to do it. As I said before, the biggest danger doesn't really come from the virus. It comes from our own inner demons, from hatred between people. If we can overcome that, we can not only defeat the epidemic more quickly, but we can create a much better world for years to come, and we can face the future epidemics and future crises in a much better way.